All right, welcome to the deep dive. And today we're doing something a little different, and honestly, it's pretty challenging.
Yeah, it really is.
We're jumping into a really substantial stack of sources, and they're all centered around one single, very highly charged and, tragic event.
That's right. We're talking about the immediate aftermath of the assassination of the conservative activist Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University.
And the material it's intense. It requires a really thoughtful, careful analysis.
It does. It's mostly excerpts from a town hall conversation with Erika Kirk. She's his widow, and now, of course, his successor is the CEO of Turning Point USA.
So these sources, they really force us to look at a few complex things all at once, don't they?
Absolutely. You've got the specific threat of political violence. You have the sort of eroding limits of free speech, and then this bigger monumental struggle for any kind of, civil discourse in a country that's just so polarized.
Okay, so let's break this down and sort of set our mission here. Our goal is to give you, the listener, a shortcut, really. A way to understand the key insights from what is a very emotional and complex public discussion.
Right. We're not just summarizing here.
No, not at all. We're dissecting the layers. Everything from, the raw personal grief and the role of faith in all this,
Yeah.
to how political rhetoric shapes these movements, and then this bizarre, rapid spread of conspiracy theories.
Exactly. And ultimately, what does this all mean for the future of one of the largest youth political organizations in America? I mean, what does this tragedy mean, not just for the Kirk family, but for this massive movement he built?
That is the core question, isn't it? This deep dive is all about pulling apart the multiple narratives that are coming out of that conversation. You've got theological discussions of forgiveness and duty on one hand, and on the other, the political necessity of defining a controversial public legacy in, the age of the viral 15-second clip.
It's really a microcosm of the current American political struggle. It is, all viewed through the lens of just immense personal tragedy.
Okay, so we have to start with the context of the event itself. I mean, the sources keep describing this as a horrible example of what appears to be a rising tide of political violence.
Right.
Charlie Kirk was shot during a campus event. He was doing the very thing he was famous for: dialogue, debate. And that setting, a college campus, is supposed to be, a protected space for ideas.
And that's what makes it so devastating. One moment, he's doing what he loved. He's arguing, he's challenging, debating, fighting for his version of truth in front of this huge crowd of young people.
And the next?
The next, his life is just brutally, instantly stopped. Erika Kirk, she described it with this profound faith, saying he blinked and saw his savior in paradise.
Wow.
But that immediate, brutal end to the dialogue is exactly why she sees his murder as the ultimate outcome of a society that's lost its willingness to just talk, to engage peacefully.
And it's important to say, too, that the sources make it clear this isn't seen as an isolated incident.
No, not at all. We've seen other high-profile events just in the past year. There were attempts against Democratic legislators, an attack on a Republican presidential candidate. It indicates that, political difference is more and more spilling over into actual physical violence.
And that trend, it just underscores how serious this conversation is.
It does. Because when ideas become a justification for bullets, the whole foundation of a civil society just starts to crumble.
Which brings us to the moment that really set the tone for her public response. That statement she typed on her phone, right? In the hours just after the tragedy.
Yeah, that statement. She typed it while she was reportedly laying in her daughter's bed. She said she couldn't bear to sleep in her own.
And it was just 5 words. You have no idea what you have just unleashed. That's an incredibly loaded thing to say right after an assassination.
It absolutely is. And it was immediately subject to all kinds of speculation. So when she went live shortly after to explain it, she was crystal clear.
What did she say?
She said it was absolutely not a call for political vengeance or for violence. She clarified that it was the Holy Spirit that is unleashed. She sees this tragedy not as an end, but as a revival, a spiritual turning point.
Can you elaborate on that? That kind of spiritual reframing of a political murder is, it's pretty profound.
Her belief is that God is going to use something this horrific. The loss of a man who was only 31 years old, who should have had decades more life, to wake people up.
People up to what?
To the critical shortness of life, and to ultimately bring glory to the kingdom. She committed herself right then and there, promising she would let the Lord use her until her last breath to achieve that mission.
So she's transforming the tragedy.
Yes, exactly. From a political act of malice into a catalyst for spiritual awakening. It focuses the movement's energy upward toward God rather than outward toward, earthly retaliation.
And this is where the conversation really pivots from that personal grief to the, alarming state of our political culture. Erika Kirk spoke really candidly about the reaction she got, and not just from, anonymous trolls online, but from actual people who were justifying the murder.
Saying he had it coming.
Exactly. That because he held views they saw as controversial or hateful, that he somehow deserved it.
And she had a sharp, just visceral reaction to that. She called that justification, that idea, sick and evil. And this is the moment she delivers her core critique of modern communication.
Which is?
She asserts, with no reservation, that the internet and the way we engage with each other online has utterly dehumanized us.
And you can really feel her sense of injustice in the sources, the idea that her husband was murdered simply for talking to people.
Yes, that is her primary message. Her husband was killed for going after ideas, not individuals. And the idea that people could actually rejoice in someone's murder just because they disliked his opinions. Well, in her words, that shows a profound sickness in the soul.
So for her, it points to this fundamental breakdown where we don't even recognize a shared humanity anymore if we disagree on policy.
That's it. The stakes couldn't be higher. It's the difference between seeing each other as fellow citizens and treating the opposition as, subhuman.
And this whole theme of dehumanization and the breakdown of discourse, it leads right into the next big intellectual problem she tackled.
The free speech versus violence conflation.
Right. An audience member, Angel Eduardo, who's with the civil libertarian group FIRE, he brought up some survey data that is, it's genuinely shocking.
And for anyone listening, FIRE is the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. They're a nonpartisan group that's all about protecting free speech on campus. And the data they presented is, it's almost dystopian.
So what did it say?
One of their surveys found that 90% of undergraduates believe, to some extent, that words themselves are violence.
90%. 9 out of 10 students see verbal disagreement or, challenging ideas as a form of physical harm. I'm trying to even grasp the magnitude of that.
Well, think about the logical consequences, right?
Yeah.
If you believe words are violence, then you are morally justified in defending yourself against those words with violence.
Which leads right to the second data point.
Exactly. The even more disturbing one, 1/3 of the students surveyed believe that using actual physical violence to stop disfavored speech can be acceptable in some cases.
1/3. That's a massive number.
It is. If a full third of the next generation thinks physical force is an okay response to shut down speech they don't like, that's not just a crisis for free speech. That's a crisis for the rule of law, for democracy itself. It sets the stage for exactly the kind of event that happened at Utah Valley.
But Erika Kirk was very quick to draw a stark line there. She differentiates Charlie's actions and behavior from any idea that he was inciting violence.
Oh, she puts an immediate squash on it, as she says, for anyone claiming he was some provocateur who got what he deserved.
And she draws a really powerful contrast.
She does. His methodology was the exact opposite of violent confrontation. What's so fascinating is the active effort he made to facilitate dialogue.
Right, with the hecklers.
Exactly. When hecklers or critics would interrupt, he'd say, "Come to the front of the line." And he would deliberately put his microphone down to remove that power imbalance and just engage with them one-on-one.
And she also emphasizes how he'd protect them from his own crowd.
Precisely. If his supporters tried to heckle the critics back, he would stop them immediately. He'd say, "Stop." That took a lot of courage for them to come up here. He was actively creating a protected space for dissent.
And her conclusion is just crushing.
It is. In response to him offering dialogue and a microphone, they gave him a bullet in the neck. The exchange wasn't provocative speech met with warranted violence. It was genuine engagement met with lethal force.
And this whole emphasis on conversation, it wasn't just a performance for him. It was literally his final published message.
Yeah, the title and the whole sentiment of his last book, the final thing he would ever write, it summarizes this perfectly.
It's a pretty remarkable piece of irony, isn't it? That a man known for such intense political activism would choose this topic for his final statement.
It really is.
Yeah.
The book could have been about policy or elections, but the title was simply, "Stop in the name of God. Stop the violence. Stop the hate. Have a conversation. Stop."
Wow.
What he recognized, and what she underlines, is that something as fundamental as having a civil conversation could genuinely change the world. Like politicians used to do. Debate intensely all day and then go grab a meal together, recognizing their shared humanity.
That ability to communicate, he connected that directly to internal personal peace, didn't he?
Absolutely. This wasn't just about political strategy for him. It was a spiritual prerequisite for any kind of civil discourse.
Can you explain that a little more?
His foundational belief was that you cannot possibly communicate effectively or respectfully with someone else if you are not at peace with yourself first. If you're internally fractured and full of rage, your external communications will just reflect that rage.
Which is why he didn't scream back at the students who were screaming at him.
Exactly. He believed they needed a detox. His advice, which is in his book, was to take a few hours. Get off your phone, go for a walk in nature, call your mother and tell her you love her, do something fundamentally beautiful and healing instead of trying to tear down something you didn't build.
It suggests that political toxicity is really a symptom of a profound internal emptiness.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Okay, so when a controversial public figure like Charlie Kirk, who was so prolific, dies so young, the immediate reaction is, to comb through every single thing he ever said.
Right. And since he was only 31, he amassed thousands of hours of audio and video, which leads directly to this challenge of out-of-context quotes, especially the ones that drew the most fire from his critics.
And those short, impactful statements are often what define him to people who never really watched him in full context.
They're used as shorthand to prove a narrative, which is exactly the point Erika Kirk addresses. This whole segment is about her trying to reclaim the totality of his character from the tyranny of the viral clip.
She was asked specifically about 3 quotes that became flashpoints, and we should present these impartially, just as they were discussed.
Okay.
First, his statement that some gun deaths were, quote, unfortunately worth it to preserve the Second Amendment, though he did say he wished he didn't feel that way.
Right.
Second, the really jarring quote, I'm sorry. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. And third, the assertion that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a mistake.
That is a very challenging set of quotes to defend, especially the one about the pilot.
So how does she defend them?
Her defense is robust, but it really requires you, the listener, to move past that initial shock and look for the philosophical thread she claims ties them all together. Her central directive to the audience was simple. Watch the full and entire clip.
Her main argument is that her husband shouldn't be deteriorated to 2 sentences.
Exactly. She argues that reducing a brilliant, complex thinker to a 15-second viral snippet is the intellectual failure of our time.
So, if the underlying motivation wasn't, as his critics say, hate or racism, what was the core value, she said, fueled those controversial statements?
She claimed unequivocally that he didn't care what a person's skin color or religion was. She said his core value was a concept he constantly emphasized. Excellence.
Excellence.
Yeah. His favorite word, she said, was earn. He loved the idea of people working hard, earning their position, succeeding based on merit and quality, just like he worked to build Turning Point from scratch.
And how does that connect to the Civil Rights Act statement? I mean, that's probably the most politically charged of the 3.
Well, when some conservatives discuss the Civil Rights Act as a mistake, they're often talked about Title II and Title VII, specifically about federal intervention in private businesses and hiring.
Okay.
So Erika Kirk implies that Charlie's position was rooted in an emphasis on federalism, the idea that the federal government overstepped its constitutional authority by dictating terms to states and private citizens.
So it was about eroding local autonomy and merit-based systems.
In favor of federally mandated ones, yes. She claims the issue was never about preventing rights, but about who has the authority to enforce them and how that enforcement impacts that core value of excellence. The problem, she stresses over and over, is defining a person by a 15-second clip on the internet, which strips away all of that necessary complex context.
And that sets the stage for the next very difficult and personal question. This one was posed by Hunter Cook.
Yeah. Hunter was the Utah Valley student Charlie was literally speaking to when he was shot, which puts him in an incredibly sensitive position to ask about accountability for political rhetoric.
So what was his question?
He acknowledged the horror of people cheering Charlie's murder, but he made a critical point. Any good faith effort to stop political violence has to hold all parties, all leaders, to the same high standard of rhetoric.
And then he asked her directly.
He asks Erika Kirk directly, will you condemn the violent rhetoric of former President Donald Trump?
And he didn't just leave it general. He backed it up with specific examples.
He did. He cited Trump's call for 6 Democratic lawmakers to be tried for sedition, which, as Hunter pointed out, is punishable by death. And Trump reposting the simple message, hang them.
I mean, That is a deeply uncomfortable political spot for the CEO of a major conservative organization to be in.
It is. And her response is really notable because she avoids condemning Trump directly.
How does she navigate that?
She stressed immediately that she would never agree with political violence, given the deep personal cost to her. But she framed the issue as being so much deeper than just one person, whether that person is the student who killed her husband or the former president.
So I see the tension. The student's asking her to address rhetoric at the national leadership level, but she redirects the responsibility back to the individual, to the family.
It's a crucial analytical moment. She insists that political violence and the dehumanizing rhetoric that enables it starts at the most basic level, in the home, with family, with the seed that grows and grows.
So she turns a political question into a call to action for parents.
Yes. She asks, do you want your kid to be a thought leader or an assassin? From her perspective, we can't just blame national figures for this sickness. We have to look in the mirror at how we're raising our children.
Yeah.
Are we actually parenting, or are we just handing them a device to go down that rabbit hole of rage and misinformation?
So while she affirmed that everyone, including political leaders, needs to turn the temperature down, she fundamentally shifts the primary responsibility away from the political stage and onto the family unit.
That's the key takeaway. For her, political rhetoric is downstream from cultural and familial failure. If the underlying culture is poisoned, national leaders will just reflect that poison. To heal, the intervention has to happen at the source, the home.
Okay, shifting to another difficult but essential issue of hate and rhetoric. The next question came from Bob Megara.
Yeah.
He's a father whose 26-year-old daughter, Sarah, was fatally shot outside the Capitol Jewish Museum due to anti-Semitism. And he asked Erika Kirk to specifically condemn the growing anti-Semitism on the right.
And he was specific. Holocaust denial, anti-Zionism, normalizing conspiracy theories about Jews.
This was, it must have been the most emotionally charged moment of the entire town hall.
Unquestionably. You're two people bonded by this horrific club of losing a loved one to ideologically motivated violence. And her stance was immediate and unified. Hate is hate. It's evil.
And she referenced her husband's own strong condemnation of it.
She did. She quoted him saying that Jew hate was brain rot.
Brain rot. That phrase, it connects the political hate directly to the conspiracy mindset we're about to get into.
Exactly. She stressed that the problem isn't about perfection. No one is perfect. But she linked that surrender to the Lord with the fundamental lack of room for hate in one's heart.
And she talked about the danger of silence.
Crucially, yes, the vacuum created by silence. If leaders and communities don't actively counter evil with truth and dialogue, then small numbers of haters get louder and louder and they fill that void with poison. Silence, she argues, gives these hate groups permission to spread.
So given that Turning Point works mainly with young people, what specific concrete actions does she commit the organization to taking to combat this, particularly on college campuses?
Their commitment is to actively counter hate through pervasive dialogue. She detailed several initiatives. They're going to continue the conversation on college and high school campuses.
Okay.
Specifically, this includes hosting Shabbat dinners at their big events like A-Fest. For anyone listening, A-Fest is their major annual political festival. They ensure Jewish organizations have booths in their exhibit halls to give them a platform and visibility.
So the promise is simple.
To counter evil with dialogue and truth, and to amplify that truth even more. And she underscored the fact that they need the entire community, both Jews and Christians, to participate in actively combating this evil.
Okay, before we dive fully into the conspiracies around her husband's death, we need to go back to this idea you mentioned earlier, that the black squares that we all have in our pocket, our phones,
are the primary culprit in the dehumanization and the brain rot.
Exactly. Erika Kirk detailed this personal practice of digital disconnection that she believes is essential for reclaiming sanity and peace.
And this is really a practical application of her late husband's philosophy. She took all social media off her phone. She relies on a dedicated team to manage their public platforms.
And her reasoning is really powerful.
It is. It's focused on prioritization. She cares profoundly less about the fickle opinion of the public, which, shifts daily based on a headline, than she cares about what her daughter says about her, about the sacred experience of her daughter running into her arms.
So it's about prioritizing the tangible, personal, and sacred over the digital toxic world.
That's her key to maintaining internal peace while leading this massive public organization. It connects perfectly back to Charlie's final philosophy we discussed, that you need internal peace for any effective external communication.
Right. His book advised getting off the phone, walking in nature.
Having coffee, telling your mother you love her, simple physical acts that are healing and beautiful. They stand in direct contrast to the destructive, rage-filled energy of trying to tear something down that you did not build online.
For the Kirks, this personal discipline is the essential daily antidote to the brain rot that fuels both hateful rhetoric and conspiracy theories.
And speaking of brain rot, let's confront the bizarre and disturbing reality surrounding the murder investigation itself.
Okay, despite the fact that a man named Tyler Robinson was arrested and charged, the sources confirm that a huge number of just outlandish conspiracy theories are spreading online.
They are genuinely staggering in their scope. I mean, they stretch the limits of logic. She listed specific theories that she and her team have had to deal with publicly.
Like what?
Okay, so first, there's the idea that Tyler Robinson, the accused killer, was actually a secretly commissioned Magier Republican agent.
Wow.
Then there's the theory that Erika Kirk herself is a Mossad agent, or Charlie's handler, and that Israel somehow orchestrated and carried out the assassination.
That's a lot.
It gets weirder. The claim that specific men seen in the crowd wearing maroon T-shirts were not supporters, but operatives, signifying an elite airborne operation.
An elite airborne operation.
And the theory that her rings, which she explained symbolize her kid's initials, her wedding band, her engagement ring, and the actual Medal of Freedom Charlie was awarded, that they symbolize some kind of secret plot.
Okay, but you said there was one that was maybe the most absurd.
Oh, yeah. The relentless, baseless theory that Egyptian aircraft have been tracking her movements globally.
Egyptian aircraft, it's unbelievable. So when she's asked why it's so hard for people to just accept the reality that Tyler Robinson, the man charged, murdered her husband, what's her analysis?
Her analysis was really straightforward. She said, it's too simple.
Too simple.
She believes that in this age of digital information overload, people have been conditioned to believe that every event must have some secret, hidden, elite cause. The idea of a lone actor driven by simple political rage or mental illness is just too mundane for the online world.
And she maintains the simple, tragic reality.
She does. She says she's seen the autopsy report, the case documents. She's been in constant contact with the prosecuting team. And the reality is, Tyler Robinson murdered her husband.
But this simple reality has become deeply complicated by the legal fallout of all this misinformation. She's worried of the impact on the judicial process.
This is a critical point. It links digital misinformation directly to the U.S. justice system. She is profoundly nervous that the sheer volume and creativity of these conspiracy theories could successfully taint the jury pool,
making it impossible to find a fair, impartial jury.
Exactly. It's a very real legal concern. A defense team could argue the public narrative has been so corrupted that due process is impossible. And if they succeed, it could create leverage for the defense, maybe a change of venue. It just makes the trial significantly more difficult.
So the chaos of online lies is literally threatening the smooth administration of justice in this murder case.
That's it. And it's why she's hesitant to lay all the evidence on the table before the trial begins. That information could ironically be weaponized by the defense to further argue for a compromised jury.
And that tension between the high stakes of justice and the absurdities of the theories, it's best shown by the context she gave for that Egyptian aircraft claim.
Right. She leaned into the humor of it a little, providing this very human, unglamorous explanation.
What did she say?
She pointed out she was pregnant for 90% of those alleged trips. Her focus wasn't on elite airborne operations, but on keeping that sacred experience private. She said when she was pregnant, she was exclusively focused on eating In-N-Out burgers and hot fudge sundaes.
Chuckles slightly. Right, not exactly clandestine meetings.
Not at all. She challenged any conspiracy theorist to check her flight log, promising it would be very boring. She even has photos proving she was in the hospital, not abroad, on some of the dates they claim. It's a powerful way to defeat these high-minded lies with low-level, undeniable reality.
And finally, she directly addressed the role of Candace Owens, the former Turning Point employee and podcaster, who she says is one of the main peddlers of these lies.
Yeah. She makes it clear that Owens is making a huge amount of money on it and building her business off of these lies.
By tying the misinformation directly to financial gain, she's really emphasizing the mercenary nature of it.
Exactly. It's not about finding truth. It's about monetizing trauma. And her message to Owens and others like her was incredibly simple, direct, and final. She just said, stop.
Okay, let's shift to the deeply personal role of faith in Charlie Kirk's life, which, dictated his final intellectual work.
Right, his last book. It wasn't about politics or policy at all. It was about the Jewish Sabbath, Shabbat.
Which he tried to observe for the full 25 hours, sundown Friday to sundown Saturday.
And his motivation for it was born out of, really, career necessity. He
Right.
was an activist who was constantly on, and he was on the verge of total burnout. He
Yeah.
realized he needed to honor that commandment.
And his insight there was pretty crucial.
It was theologically driven. He said if you don't honor the Sabbath, you're the one who misses out on the gift, not God.
That's a powerful way to frame it. Can you explain that a bit? The concept of missing out on the gift.
It reframes the commandment from an obligation you owe God to a provision God gives for human well-being. God doesn't need us to stop working. We need to stop working.
So by refusing to rest, we're refusing the spiritual and mental restoration God intended to provide.
That's it. He saw that constant activity, even for a cause he believed in, was spiritually and physically unsustainable. The Sabbath was literally the mechanism he used to detoxify and reset.
So now Erika Kirk has taken on this massive leadership role. Is she keeping the Sabbath now, trying to balance the demands of being a CEO with this commitment to rest?
She said she is trying her best. She noted that observing it, even imperfectly, helps her feel close to him and his spirit, but she's not keeping a full 24-hour straight observance.
Why not?
She has a very practical, real-world constraint. She's her elderly mother's medical power of attorney, so she needs to remain available. She can't just completely disconnect.
I see.
But she stressed that Charlie wasn't legalistic about it. He encouraged people to take the core concept and make it your own. The principle of rest and disconnection remains, even if the strict schedule is modified.
This brings us to what's probably the biggest perceived contradiction in her public life.
Right.
Erika Kirk has been outspoken, advocating for women to marry and have children young, to prioritize family over career. Yet here she is, a young mother of 2 under 3, and she's simultaneously the CEO and chairwoman of Turning Point USA.
The trad wife advocate who suddenly becomes the girl boss.
Exactly. And it's a dichotomy she addressed directly. She acknowledged that the public might look at her and see a conflict.
And her explanation is that she didn't seek or ask for the role. She sees it not as a personal ambition or a career advancement, but as a sacred duty to my husband and a blessing to preserve his legacy.
She said she was perfectly happy being a stay-at-home mom.
She did. She still calls that a powerful job title. She clarifies that this is absolutely not a 9-to-5 career for her.
So what's the philosophical distinction she's drawing?
She uses the word career to mean a purely wage-earning, self-fulfillment-focused path. This CEO role is deeply personal, familial, and mission-driven. She sees the organization as the remaining breathing version of her husband.
So the staff, the movement, they're all family to her.
In a way, yes. She views this leadership not as a corporate job, but as a passionate personal obligation. And while she admits it's immensely difficult and exhausting, she credits a heck of a village for making it logistically possible.
And did she offer any insight into that support system? Any advice for other women?
She did. She gave specific faith-based advice to a young woman in the audience named Isabella Reggi, who asked if it's sustainable to live in a modern city, care about a career, but also want to marry a like-minded conservative man.
And what was her advice?
It focused first on personal preparedness. She said, you have to be the woman who will attract the man you pray for, meaning going to church, Bible study, telling your pastor you're ready.
And what about the timing of family versus career?
She was very practical. She told Isabella that the biological window for having a family is very limited short, whereas a career can be started later or managed remotely while raising babies, which is exactly what she's trying to do now.
Okay, let's talk about one of the most unforgettable moments right after the tragedy.
Her public act of forgiving the man accused of murder.
For many people, religious or not, this was just incomprehensible, baffling.
And she explained the profound spiritual motivation behind this seemingly impossible act. She stressed it's not about forgetting what he did or condoning the sick and evil act.
So what is it about?
For her, forgiveness is a radical act of self-liberation. It is releasing myself from the enemy's hands where he could have a foothold in me.
So holding on to rage or bitterness would just allow the killer to maintain power over her life and spirit.
That's her argument. By forgiving, she chooses to unleash something even greater than rage or revival. By letting the Lord use the moment, rather than letting the devil use her anger.
But what about the tension between spiritual forgiveness and the demand for earthly justice? Did she draw a line between those two?
No, she argues there is no difference because we serve a just God. Her faith allows her to rest easy knowing He is sovereign and just. She lets the Lord handle the ultimate outcome, trusting that divine justice will prevail.
And she mentioned the book of Job in this context.
Yes. She cites Job as the specific spiritual mechanism for this trust. She noted that God restores even more than what was lost, but that restoration only fully happens when Job prays for his friends, even the ones who were against him and had falsely accused him.
So by forgiving the perpetrator, she feels she's fulfilling the spiritual condition necessary for the divine restoration she trusts in.
That's the idea.
And if she were to ever meet the accused killer, what would she say to him?
She stated, firmly and finally, nothing. I have nothing to say to you. Nothing.
Wow. It suggests the forgiveness was entirely a transaction between her and God for her own liberation.
Exactly. Not a pastoral interaction with the accused.
Okay, let's end on the final theme that was introduced. The vibe shift.
Right. It's often defined politically as a return to populism and, crucially, to religion in response to what's broadly called wokeism.
And Charlie Kirk is often cited as a key voice in that shift.
He is. And that vibe shift is rooted in the intentional integration of faith into political discussions that he championed. She explained he would discuss liberty, justice, and freedom on campus.
And when students asked him where those ideas came from,
He gave them the source. It's in the scriptures. It's God.
Mhm.
He believed you couldn't effectively fight for a cause if you didn't understand the foundational source material.
And she noted this authenticity led to a really powerful observation at his memorial service.
It's a heartbreaking and incredibly insightful observation. She said when Charlie was murdered, people didn't instinctively reach for a copy of the Constitution or a political manifesto. They grabbed a Bible.
And her final profound point on this topic.
Is that once you get the Bible in your hands, the Constitution makes way more sense.
That suggests the future direction of the movement she now leads will be explicitly tethered to Scripture as the ultimate source of liberty, truth, and political principles.
It's a shift from purely political activism to a theologically informed cultural and political war.
What a deep dive. I mean,
Yeah.
into this unique and tragic intersection of personal grief, political activism, legal challenges, and just foundational faith.
Yeah.
We've covered the central tension between dialogue and violence, the toxic role of social media in skewing both a man's legacy and a murder investigation, and the practical and spiritual challenges facing a massive organization suddenly without its founder.
The sources really show us how a single tragic act of violence forces this necessary, difficult reevaluation of public rhetoric, of personal responsibility, and the critical fight against widespread misinformation. Her town hall was a complex argument for both rigorous external engagement in the political sphere and mandatory internal peace in the personal sphere.
And the whole discussion, it really highlighted that so many people, especially young people, are struggling to find peace and clarity in a world that feels inherently toxic. They turn to digital spaces for connection that often just increases their anxiety and rage.
Leading to that brain rot and the sanctioning of violence.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. Charlie Kirk's foundational advice, the prerequisite for all political engagement, was that you cannot communicate with someone unless you are fundamentally at peace with yourself.
So based on his suggestions to get off the phone to walk in nature or seek out meaningful sacred connection, what action should you take daily away from your device to achieve that internal peace? And how might achieving that peace fundamentally change the way you engage in and ultimately elevate your own political conversations?